Welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. We're those friends that you can take with you wherever you are on the path of infertility.
Hello and welcome to the Springs in the Desert podcast. My name is Cassandra. I'll be your host for today's episode, and I'm here with a very dear friend of the ministry, Leigh, Snead. How's it going?
Oh, Cassandra, I'm so glad to be here. Yeah, I love Springs in the Desert, and I'm always happy to come on the pod.
I know, and this is exciting today. We're going to talk about your new book, but real quick, just fill our listeners in case they missed your other episodes
Okay.
and who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Leigh Fitzpatrick Snead. I'm a fellow with the Catholic Association. I'm a co-host of a nationally syndicated radio show on EWTN Radio, Conversations with Consequences, also available as a podcast.
Ooh.
We have a new Substack, fledgling, we like to call it, Catholic Conversations with TCA. And my work with them has primarily revolved around pro-life issues, adoption, infertility, other family things, anything that sort of concerns a Catholic mom with what's happening in the public square, with a little pop culture thrown in. Yeah.
Always going to be throwing that in there.
You got to get the hook.
Yeah. So this is really exciting because you have a book coming out in January, right?
Yep, January 20th.
Okay, it's coming out in January. It's called Infertile but Fruitful, Finding Fulfillment When You Can't Conceive. That's from Sophia Institute Press, which is very local to me. So I'm always happy to see when good books are coming out at Sophia. It's so exciting. But you said, this is the book I wish I'd had as a young Catholic bride in her 20s, facing unexplained infertility, and aside from my husband's unfailing and loving support, feeling so very alone, which I think will resonate with so many of our listeners and people in this community. I think a lot of us have been there. So please tell us about the book, your process of writing it, why you're writing it now, and the needs you're hoping the book will meet.
Sure. I think that part of that feeling alone and maybe not finding the book exactly what I needed. I did a lot of research at getting ready for this book. I don't think exactly what I wanted was out there. I was also pretty immersed in popular culture. There it goes again. It's secular culture, I guess I should say. We did have some Catholic friends, my husband and I, but we were in DC. He was an associate, a young associate at a law firm. And so we had a lot of different kinds of friends, but I don't think any of them were married. A lot of them were cohabitating. It just wasn't that sort of group. So I wouldn't have really met a peer who was not only married, but faithful, and then also experiencing infertility. So some of that was on me. Now looking back at writing the book, you realize a lot of things.
Right.
But also I think that people just weren't talking about it as much. The difference in the NAPRO technology landscape, the availability to so many women now to see those kind of physicians is completely different. For instance, for myself, I had to go to Nebraska. I had to work with a Creighton model teacher on the phone who also was in Nebraska.
Wow.
And now there's a practice in my town. I know they're just everywhere, or at least somebody who respects. It's a lot easier. There's a lot of bigger networks to find Catholic physicians or even Catholic respecting physicians. So that's another thing, which is a good thing. So I wrote a couple essays, personal essays for the National Catholic Register. And I think that they were probably during maybe National Infertility Week. And one was an open letter to those experiencing infertility. And I got a lot of responses. And I got a lot of DMs. It was a lot of people who I knew said, somebody that you don't know just sent me this article.
Right.
Wow, we need this. I got messages from friends I didn't know were struggling with infertility, saying, thanks for talking about this. And I had been, if anyone came to me personally, I was always willing to talk about it. I often had a record of someone coming to me and talking to me and we're sharing the experience. And I'm saying, yes, I know it's hard. Let's try praying. Let's do this. Have you tried this? And they often would get pregnant. And so sometimes I would even be forward with somebody who I knew was thinking maybe they were having a hard time. And I said, I have a pretty good track record. If you just open up to me a little bit, I don't know how God works, but it seems to me that there's something, of course, that's superstition. But there was a time when I did feel that way, that I was bringing some relief to women like that. But I didn't never do it in a very public way, only because it is really personal. You're talking about your own married life, your own sex life, your love life, but your deepest held dreams and desires. Yeah, but I got such a positive response. And from priests too, priests saying, listen, I'm going to put this on file. Now I have something to give to parishioners who come to me. A lot of times I just don't know what to say. And I love when people say they don't know something, right? And they found something and then now they have something they can work with. And then I think I had a follow-up piece again in the Register, same sort of response. I had a mentor who just said to me, Leigh, this is your book. This is the time. And I thought about it and it did feel like the time. I just turned 50 a couple of months ago. So I was approaching 50, getting to that point where I was almost rehearsing in my brain, just saying, I will never be pregnant. It's because I had unexplained infertility. And it's been years since I've done any sort of treatment care under a doctor. And we have adopted 4 sons in the last 20 years. But the idea that it was over, I probably technically some insensitive doctor with terrible bedside manner would have told me it was over a long time ago. I think a lot of women who are approaching perimenopause, who have never experienced their own fertility, it's a weird thing to grieve, the fertility you never had. But I felt like it was okay. And I felt also the response was there, but I also wanted to show people this is what infertility can look like, even if you never get pregnant or you're never able to carry to term. Because so many infertility stories, even today, end in pregnancy. A lot of people, and that's great. That's great news. It's great. Again, the availability of great doctors, the advancements in neprotechnology, people going to see those doctors earlier rather than as a last resort. It's really wonderful. And then in the secular world, of course, oftentimes we see surrogacy and IVF is constantly on the supermarket shelves of the gossip magazines. And it's really anywhere. It's not even just the tabloids. It's permeated our culture. And then especially, a year and a half ago, the Alabama ruling about the personhood thing, that just really lit things up. And now, of course, it's in the news almost every day. Right. So I got to that age and I just thought, okay, I'm ready to shift gears and really take on this sort of big sister. I've been there, and this is how you can not just survive this, flourish.
Right.
And it's all through and picking up our cross and carrying it and realizing that all that suffering brings us closer to him, which is so hard, right? When you're in the middle of it, it is so hard, but obviously ultimately worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that, look, listeners, if you're not in a place today where you can receive that message that someday you can be flourishing, like even if there's never a pregnancy, that's okay. This path, we talk about this often. I feel like there are different stages, right? And sometimes you're in the thick of it and you're in treatments, and that can sometimes feel like it's taking over. But then when you live with this for a while and you can maybe return to feeling like yourself again. And because I too am in a position, I'm post hysterectomy, it's never going to happen for me. It happened very suddenly and traumatically, but it's like life has gone on and other opportunities have come in and God is still working. And I think that's part two why. So you interviewed people for this book. You were including a range of infertility experiences. You talked to Anne,
I
who
did.
gave her story for the book. So can you just tell us a little bit about, just speaking about different infertility experience, what you learned from that, and why did you think it was important to include different perspectives in your book?
Well, I really try hard, just in general, when I'm talking about infertility or I'm talking about adoption, to not conflate the two, that not everyone who is infertile is called to adoption. I think there's a lot of good literature about not treating adoption as a second best option, even though a lot of people obviously pursue adoption after failing at the fertility thing. So it's a very fine-tuned balance. And I feel personally, I'm an adoptive mom and I've had a great experience and I love to share that, but I really don't know a lot. I don't know a lot about adoption. And the same thing with infertility, I guess. I'm just an infertile person with an experience. I do have a background in philosophy and medical ethics and married to a bioethicist. But what I found actually was I had spread the net pretty wide because we infertile girls, we found each other. And so I do have kind of a big network of women with different kinds. And I think out of 8 or 9 women I asked, only 3 responded with
Wow.
their I gave the sort of the same questions with freedom to answer how you wished or add what you wanted to. But so many people said, this was just too hard for me. This was just too hard for me to think about these questions.
Wow.
Or I've never let myself think about these questions before. And these were all women who were in the position of who could also say, I'm never going to be pregnant, whether they were post-hysterectomy or they were over 50 or all these different things. So that was really, and I went back and forth between including that part in the book, but I do think it's really interesting. The 3 women who replied, including our Anne, it was amazing because it was 3 different stories. And one was Mary Bruno, who you probably know, who is a really great member of our community. She's amazing. She's written some great books. She replied, and her experience with an early hysterectomy and all of her many surgeries. And then she later did feel a call to adoption, and but that was something that she had a unique experience with. It wasn't just an automatic yes for her. And so she talks about that. She talks about because she's also a Creighton model practitioner, which is an interesting thing to have to dealing with fertility all the time. And then Anne's story, it was just, she's such a great writer. So she really made the work easy for me to fit it right into my book. They both are. And actually, all 3 it was amazing. It was just providential. The 3 that responded were perfect. Anne's story about how, I think Anne's very good about recognizing that there's not always a baby, and that people who don't, I feel like there is something to be said about when you adopt, somehow then people know what to do with you, right? You're like, okay, well, you look like us, so okay, we can just move on now. Whereas there's still some discomfort on their part. You don't know what to say when someone dies, but this is like all the time. You're always infertile, and people, sometimes they just don't know what to say, and then they end up not saying anything. And that can be isolating for couples who have experienced infertility and then who don't have any children. And so Anne's perspective is just fantastic. And she also talks about being sensitive to your husband's needs, because it's really easy as women. It's all about us. We're the ones with most of the appointments, all that kind of stuff. We're the ones who aren't pregnant, invisibly so. Everyone knows that we're not pregnant. And then the third, actually, she contributed anonymously because what they had dealt with was male factor infertility. Right. And just really private. But again, that was such a really important perspective, because again, that's just as limited as the fertility, not infertility narrative is. That's one we really don't hear too much about.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so her story is amazing. And again, just the different perspective, just the way it affects their marriages and how prayer and the love of Christ and feeling his love for them, they're beautiful stories. I also include, not in the same chapter with those 3 stories, is a story of a friend of mine, Elizabeth Santora Marcolini. And she is a great writer too. And they had experienced infertility, and we had talked so much about it, and it's a quick bond, right? And they had adopted 2 children, and we had talked about that and some of the complexities that come when that can happen. And then she just completely unexpectedly got pregnant.
Yeah.
And because my husband and I weren't done trying to get pregnant when we adopted, but we wanted a baby right now. We were ready to start that. And so we were 29, and I was 29. It was after the adoption of our first son that we saw Dr. Hilgers. And so I do have a part in the book where I kind of talk about, you don't have to stop trying to conceive if you want to adopt. They're not mutually exclusive. You can get at the same time. And that's why I also wanted to bring in Lizzie's story, because the same thing. And she just talks about how open-ended their story is. She doesn't know if they'll get pregnant again. But they'd like to have more children. They're open to all of it. But she also talks about the strange mix of emotions, I think, people's reactions, saying, because I think there's always that, oh, you adopt and then you'll get one of your own. And those of us who have adopted, we know that these are our own, these are our children. And obviously you don't adopt a child in order to try to up your chances of getting pregnant. The whole thing's just strange.
Right.
But again, people like that sort of happy ending story.
Yeah.
And Lizzie just is just remarkably frank and just beautifully. The way she talks about how almost worrying they wouldn't love this biological baby as much, just because, which is a ridiculous thing to say. Like, it's complicated, all those feelings. And especially when you're getting such strange messages of, they seem like positive encouragement and people are excited for you, but it's a weird boggle of things. And so I think she puts it a lot more eloquently than I am right now. So you can look forward to reading it in January.
Well, and it is so much like grief, because there sometimes in front of the magnitude of the suffering that really is infertility, which if you're not dealing with infertility and you stop and think about it for a minute, it's like, oh, like this is a cross that can reach into the future. So there are families that there are no next generation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, that is just life-altering stuff.
Yeah.
And a huge cross and thing to work through with the Lord. And like death, people don't know what to say when they're confronted with that. And it's just much easier for all of us socially when we can put people in little boxes.
Absolutely.
So my husband and I work at a college, and we are often, especially at the beginning of the year, in contact with parents. And naturally, they ask if we have kids.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting too when you put yourself in the box sometimes, because it's like, well, no, we can't, but maybe we'll adopt one day, or we can't, but because you can't just say like, no, I had a hysterectomy.
I know.
And let them sit with that.
Yes, because even though you are suffering, you want to make that person feel comfortable.
Right.
It's a really strange
It is strange.
Yeah.
It is strange. But this is part of the reason why talking about it is so important. So you and your husband, Carter, have obviously been in the Catholic arena for years and years. You've been talking about all this important stuff for a long time. How have you seen that conversation change over time, both in just the general public sphere and in the church? And do you hope that this book will continue to break the silence and help those conversations keep evolving?
I hope so. It's so tough because I think everyone realizes at this point that you either know someone who has used IVF, or that you know someone who loves someone who has used IVF. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to, I'm lost for words right now. It is a very difficult topic to speak with other people about, because you want to be compassionate and know that we love them, we love their children, we don't, but that we have very strong objections to this. And especially if it's a fellow Catholic, it's like, this is what our church teaches. Yeah, so you want to be loving and kind and generous, but also speak the truth, which is obviously how we love people, by telling them the truth. And we want them to get to heaven, and there's just a lot of things. So I do think with it being in the news, I think with having a Catholic vice president in the White House, that conversation has been more like, as Catholics, we're media Catholics, I guess, we're more alert to those kind of policies that are happening. I think that we saw a lot of pro-life gains with the last Republican administration, and this time I think we're seeing some mixed messages, I guess we should say. Right. It's a confusing time. I think for me personally, when I was drafting the proposal for my book, of course you get this idea that somehow what you'll say will like sneakily convert people, or I'll be able to show them. I won't make it too Catholic, right? So other people will read it and be tricked into thinking like, oh, I shouldn't do IVF or something, you know, these crazy things. And then I just thought, the Alabama ruling, again, that was a big one, when all of a sudden that was really that personhood argument. Right. Gosh, we've just been through all this so much. I do think that there's a lot of people who sort of respect that Catholics don't do IVF, but they think it's like a superstition somehow. I probably the same thing around some of our beliefs about birth control and all kinds of things. But the thing is, I think that there's so many Catholics who need to hear it and need to understand what exactly goes on. I think that's happening a lot. I think there's a lot of really good journalism right now explaining how many embryos are destroyed with every cycle, how many embryos are in permanent frozen storage, like what this really means for you. What are the effects? I have a friend who has 5 biological children, and I had no idea that one of the questions, like a normal routine child checkup question, is like, how are these children conceived? Because of different health ramifications that could be a result of IVF.
Oh my goodness.
I had no idea. So that's a mainstream medicine question to ask. There's just so many big things.
Yeah.
And then that's before we even talk about surrogacy. That's a whole nother thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, there's so much going on. And I think it's easy to just want to lay down and be like, oh, toothpaste is out of the tube. Where do we go from here? But there has to be something. And I think as long as good people are thinking and writing and talking about it, hopefully it will change some hearts. And I think even one thing we could just start with is let's get some regulation in this industry. Let's stop letting them take advantage. How many horror stories have to be in the New York Times, the Washington Post, mainstream media before people realize these doctors are out for one thing, and that's money?
It's a crazy thing.
It's a crazy thing.
It's a crazy thing. And I think part of it too is it's so important to stand up and tell our stories as Catholic women who are trying to do our best, right? And we know that is extremely hard.
Yeah.
It is extremely hard, especially in the world. There are headwinds. God never told us it would be easy. But that to say you are not less of a Catholic marriage because you don't have kids and because you don't do whatever it takes to try to make that happen, which of course is not something licit methods or illicit methods. That is just not something that's ultimately in our control.
Right. And I'm so glad you brought that up too, because I think I've seen some women who have really stuck with all the illicit protocols, but for years. And a few of them really did end up with a successful pregnancy and a lovely little baby. But for me, we got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. But I was ready we had taken a little break. I was ready to do it again. But again, so we already had our son, Orlando, through adoption. And my husband just said, maybe we don't. Let's just adopt again. And it was such a relief because you want to do all that. And that was, again, I think I was 34 when we made that decision. And so I still basically tortured myself for the next 10 years. Like, should I be doing more? Or I would just at least start taking like a whole bunch of supplements. I think like I should be doing this. I should be doing more. Honestly, I even had a twinge like in the last couple of months. I saw something new that was being done. I was like, oh, maybe I should try that. And I'm like, whoa, Leigh, check in with yourself. It's all the time. It's just so much a part of you that it's really hard to fight those urges. And knowing that it's okay and that it doesn't take away from your qualifications as a Catholic couple if you don't go to the ends of the earth, even licitly, like you said. Like, it's just, you have to just listen and be open. And that's really hard because your instinct in the moment is just to fix it.
Yeah.
And then your overwhelming feeling is fatigue and brokenness. And I think it makes it really hard to make decisions.
Yeah. And God redeems.
Yeah, right.
God redeems. So, Leigh, thank you just so much for sharing all that. If you could say, just as we come to the end of our podcast today, if you could say one thing from your heart to those Catholic brides who are listening right now and who are really struggling physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what would you say?
I think the main thing to remember is that you're a family from the day you say I do. You're already a family. You're already complete. You're called to be fruitful, and whether that's children or anything else, spiritual motherhood, philanthropy, just anything, being kind to someone is a spiritual fruit. And I think that you have to know you're not broken. You're not less than. There's something that needs to be fixed about you. God loves you just as you are. And his plans for you are mysterious. But just to give into it, if you can. It's so hard, even every day, even people without infertility, that's a big ask. But to trust his love for you and to trust the love of your spouse and rely on each other and rely on friends. And don't be afraid to ask for the prayers of other people, because we're Catholics. We believe in the prayers. We want to call on the angels and saints to help with our intentions and to make God's will work in our lives.
Yeah. Amen. Leigh, how can our listeners find out more about you and about your book?
Well, you can go to catholicassociation.org, where often lists any recent articles and some information. There's links to our podcast and our Substack. You can sign up for immediate monitoring, which delivers maybe 8 to 12 articles from across Catholic and mainstream news publications about issues happening in the public square that are of interest to Catholics. You can find my book available for pre-order at Sophia Institute Press and also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Well, Leigh, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back again soon to
My
hear how it's
pleasure.
going.
All right. Thanks, Cassandra. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Listeners, just always remember God loves you, and so do we. We'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us for this Springs in the Desert podcast episode. We would be so grateful if you took a minute to rate and review us so that we can reach more listeners. Don't forget to check out our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, and go to our website, springsinthedesert.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter and community prayer list, read our blog, and register for virtual and in-person events. Most importantly, remember that God loves you so much, and so do we.